Welcome to Endgame Sensei, where I berate two IMs who have no idea what they're doing in the endgame. Will it be torturous? Will it hurt your eyes? Yes, the answer is yes. But here we go. We haven't done the show in a while, and mostly it's because we've been too busy with the dojo training program. But all these positions that I give them in Endgame Sensei are part of the program. So for example, this one is a position from the 1300 to 1400 rating band. And one of the things you're going to see about all these positions is sometimes, like this one, you might be able to optically say white's better because of certain positional advantages, and we'll talk about what those are in a second. But we'll also see that they can be very technical, and the object of the endgame sparring is not to be 100% correct. It is to outplay people at your rating level, right? So what we're going to do, for example, is we'll have hopefully time for both of them to play it with the white pieces, and then we will then show what happened in the game where some true majestic play happened. I won't reveal what it was, but some majestic play happened after that. So let me also say that for the training program, the way we have it listed here is we said we'd like white to win 3 times in a row. And like I said, that's against somebody of your own level, Smyslov playing black, you're not going to beat the guy 3 times in a row. I don't care who you are, honestly. But the thing I want to stress is what I created since this all happened was the rook endgame progression, which is based as a match. And so I'm kind of leaning to making this kind of struggle a match where it would be more than one position where you'd have to win the match. So anyways, that might be an evolution that happens. But all of these endgame senseis, we of course save, put up on our YouTube, so that if you play it out, you can have a chance to either watch these fools and how they did it afterwards, or even before you do your match, and then you can get a sense of how the position works. And also, they'll make so many terrible mistakes, David and Kostya will, that they might even be kind of constructive and maybe even soothing, given that whatever your rating level is, these chump IMs don't have a clue what they are doing. Okay, let's see. Are we almost ready to start here, my friends? Are we almost
Kostya looks like he's not listening to you, which may be a good idea.
Sorry, I checked out, but I'm ready.
Man. All right, let me just switch it. So it looks like Hello Kostya has gotten white first, and I might have to adjust a little clock thing over here. Let's see here, where is that little clock thing? Little clock thing is not where I wanted it to be. I'm going to add another little window capture then, my friends. Sorry about this immense window that I got, but we got to get Mr. Pruse's time. Kostya takes on rook takes e6. So we'll talk about the decision afterwards. We'll also show what happened in the game. This was Aronin-Smylov, 1951. It was a big game, especially for Mr. Aronin. Could have medaled, I think, in the Soviet Championship 1951. Okay, I'm hoping that looks okay. One of the great things about this position is that with both rook at g8 and rook c6, even if you think one is better than another one, it's still going to be a big technical challenge to convert it. For example, the problem with rook c6 is, right, maybe this rook, the black rook, comes in and gets active. And we have a question in chat, not a question, but Diatico saying maybe King E2 instead of Rook takes C6, leaving both options open. And maybe I should have even had that as a third option. Rook takes C6 narrowly won the battle for best move there in our Twitch poll. All right, so big decision here for Coast, yeah? A big problem. Oh, by the way, like the Rook had an option. Instead of Rook B1, it could have gone Rook G1. Though on Rook G1, you have to wonder, is G4 just going to shut you all the way down? Rook B1, the danger is that Rook can get just completely sidelined once it takes on B2. Like you take on B2 and then you ask yourself, well, what next after that, buddy? What next after that, buddy? Got a question. Do I recommend 5:30 or 15:30 for the opening and middle game sparring? Well, the reason we have a fast time control for the endgame, like here with Endgame Sensei, is in most tournaments now that are often something like 90 plus 30. Sometimes you get a little bit more time at move 40. But in general, you're going to get a lot of endgame positions where you just don't have that much time, but you do have 30 seconds. So the 30 seconds is a big deal. And part of Endgame Sensei is for us to get accustomed to that kind of time pressure, that kind of pressure. So the other ones, whether it's opening or middle game, you will definitely have more time. And even for Rook Endgame, the Rook Endgame challenge, I set that to 1:30 because often you just have usually in fact, by the time you get to the technical Rook Endgame positions, you've got basically no time at all. So that's the way we have the time controls set as fast on Endgame Sensei. Okay, this is interesting. So David has a severe problem that Rook G8. Rook G8 is a hell of a drug right now. And it's kind of nice that he didn't commit to, say, Rook C7, which would have let the bishop go back to F8. And in addition to Rook D1 on move 1, Black could have played bishop F8 immediately, which is kind of, I guess, what I thought would happen. Because now this seems like hard to imagine. Hard to imagine. Maybe we might even get a resignation soon. We might get ourselves a resignation. My sense, too, was that Proust was despondent. He was despondent by the Black position. He was like, oh, I'll never have a chance with this one. Because Rook D1, well, he did think about it. Yeah, well, anyways, we'll talk about it afterwards. Douglas asks, could White have prevented the Rook getting back? I assume you mean, like, could we have prevented Rook D1, Rook D7? I think the answer is you don't need to prevent that because the pawn endgame is going to be completely devastating for White because we're just going to play Rook D1, King C4 and start munching. So this is toast. This is toast. You got this coffee mug? This is from the pantry, Santa Fe, New Mexico, my hometown. So if your parents have that mug, dude, that's pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive indeed. I haven't been back to home since pandemic started, so years. I'm gonna be going in August. But first, there's the Maryland State Championship this weekend. That's gonna be exciting. And then also, weekend after that, I'm traveling to Chicago for the U.S. Senior Open. U.S. Senior Open. So I got 2 weeks of hard business. Maybe should I tell them they can resign? Should I tell them they can resign? Ezra's Monkey. Just subscribe. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll tell you who needs a sub. Oh, David, man. He needs to reconcile himself to just being dead lost. David has generally outperformed Kostya in these battles. But this one, forget about it, boss. This one's a done deal. This one's a done deal. But maybe next time after rook c6, there it is. Maybe this will, so we'll run it back. Let me get over here, fix my mouse. All right, good job, you guys. We'll run it back and see what happens. All right, so there they go again. The colors are flipped. I should hide this little white to move thing. Now, are the times going to be wrong? I bet they are. Yeah, they're wrong. Okay, so let's... You know what's so ridiculous? Look at that cry. The times are already right there, boss. The times are there. You don't need to do it so fancy. It's just right there, buddy. You know, come on. Can you imagine if they had a streaming sensei thing and I was the Padawan? Oh, man, I'd get ripped up. I'd get ripped up, dog. They would destroy me. Okay, so King E2 happened first. That was not actually technically allowed, but that's a pretty good move. That's a pretty good move. However, let's think about this. So, King F7, Rook C6, Bishop F8. The thing was about this King E2 move, I don't think you needed to prevent the rook from coming back. As we saw, it was that Rook C8 move was deadly. So right, this will be an interesting position with now Rook C6, Bishop F8. You could also snag the bishop. It's ugly to snag that bishop because the knight looks so pretty. So this will be an interesting, as contrasted to the last game, which finished quite quickly. This will be interesting. Bishop F8. Now, I think one of the things about just the framing of the sensei is when I said Rook C6 versus Rook G8, I think they were like, I'm guessing Rook G8 is wrong. Rook G8, of course, is a very natural move at the beginning, right? To go into the pawn game saying that that's a winning pawn end game. And so I think they were primed, as the psychologists say. They were primed to think, maybe I'll just do this one. But you can see here that even though white is by all means better, it's not 100% a done deal. In particular, if we can just we end up sacking a pawn or whatever, as long as we get the bishop active, we might have hope. I do think it is technically lost, but we might have some flimsy flimmer. We might have ourselves a flimsy flimmer of hope. Yeah. Do we have a flimsy flimmer? Yeah, well, my gut would be Bishop D6. And then if Knight D5, maybe we could think about King E6, but then that's not true because he has Knight takes B4. Okay, so Rook D4 active. Now notice what happened in the last game was that the bishop on G7, it didn't even get out. So at least here it's out. And Rook D4, the first question is, well, dog. Well, dog. What's going to happen on F3? There's also the question of like, well, what's going to happen on Knight D5? So I'm not sure I had a much better move. I don't feel great about Rook D4. Oh, that feels despondent. Okay. Feels a little despondent. Feels a little despondent. One cool thing maybe just by waiting is if knight d5, I was going to say knight d5 we could play f5, but it's not true because he's got rook f6. So on knight d5, I guess we have to play bishop d6 anyway. Not the most happy of the pappy, I'll tell you that. Oh, could be bad. Could be real bad. Al Gilda, oh, the creativity. Branch to branch for ranchers. I don't know. It's getting deep. All right, hello, Kostya. You need some hope, buddy. You need some hope. So if Kostya could somehow arrange, like, it's hard, man. A lot of times, though, it's got to be said that it might look super simple, but then if he can ever, like, either activate the bishop or trade it off, even if he's the pawn down that he is, he's got hopes. He's got hopes. We'll see in the game, my sensei, Smyslov, dude, defense on a whole nother level. A whole nother level, my friends. Oh. Is this controversial? So, the obvious claim is that the reason it's controversial is white's rook was better than black's rook. So, in order to do it this way, you have to really believe that it's all the way gone. And it might be. It might be. In this position, it would be great if the pawn were still on f2, by the way, which Kostya coaxed to f3, which I think is where it wants to be anyway. Because bishop c5 is kind of the only active move. Okay. Excuse my thinking here. I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking about it. So let's say some obvious stuff. Mr. Proust is saying that king d3, king c4 is going to end this fair game. It might be true. And that bishop c5, d4 is nothing. And black, of course, his only hope is like, if I could just not lose another pawn and somehow use the superior ability of the bishop to move around, then maybe I'd have a shot. Another problem, well, I was going to say, another problem with coaxing f3 is that at some point I'd love to play the move f5 just to start getting some of those pawns off of the dark squares. But f5 at this point doesn't even come with a fe threat, even though it's, it's not the biggest threat anyway. One thing we'll see, actually, and this is why the cohort training, I think, is so important, because I think, if you're playing somebody at your level, whoa, that was a terrible move. That was a god-awful move, Kostya. Oh, man, that was a really stinker-upper. Okay, let's talk about it. Kostya's dreaming. Okay, Kostya's dreaming. He's going to play f5. And then he's going to be able also to get g4 in. And then wiggle and diggle his king downtown. Not a chance. Not a chance. But it was a poor situation. I was trying to make bishop c5. Could I make bishop c5 and bishop d4 work? Basically, if I could win the pawn on b2 and only lose one of the other ones, maybe I have a shot. The problem here is like now the king is banking that he will get in on the king side. But if he doesn't, he's not only down a pawn, but he's down a piece on, let's call it the main theater, which is this stuff going on the queen side, man. So let's just say king d3. And then what do you want to do, buddy? I don't know. I don't know what you want after that, my dog, my dog, my dog, my dog. That's what they call a horrendo position. Mr. Proust, by the way, he's in Hawaii. And so he's on pineapple time over there. You can see he just woke up. That's why he lost so quickly the first game. That's his excuse anyway. He's like in a basement or something. They put him in the basement. I probably rented some house. They're like, Proust, I know this is a family vacation, but we're going to put you in the basement, boss. We're just going to put you in the basement while you suffer with Kostya over here. One of the regrets I have about earlier Endgame Senseis is sometimes they lasted so long, these guys playing out the moves, that we didn't really have a chance to go over the game as it was played in full. So this will give us that chance. In the game, by the way, we'll see rook g8 was played. And even if you decide the move is a mistake, I have full sympathy for doing it. Yeah, king d3, we knew he was going to do it. I don't see any hope at all for black. King g6 was just giving up. A raw giving up of the game coast to coast. Because now you can't even, I don't see how you do f5. Worst case scenario here for white, you play knight d5, make the bishop move, then play knight e3, making the pawn commit. Oh no, oh no. And that's just the way you could play if you don't want to think, you know. If you don't want to think at all. This pawn's coming forward, especially just because now if your pawn goes to f4, it's just even weaker than before because e5 is then weak. And if you take, then obviously you've activated the big ombre. You've activated the ombre, man. Nobody wants to activate the ombre. There he comes. He's probably going to make it easy on himself. He's going to be like, I don't want to think about all this stuff. I'm just going to play knight e3 next to make Kostya commit. The poor soul. Make his pawn commit. It's a brutal business. Mr. Proust, however, is a maximalist. And the maximalist move here would be king c4. No, he's just going to make it easy. I think Mr. Proust might play better when he's exhausted and the family's on his case. You know? Might just be playing better in that case. Just not always trying to win right away. You know, just mellow it out, Bruce. You don't need to win right away. You can give him the old-fashioned squeeze. Yeah. Is c3 a reasonable move? Well, I like this one better because it forces the issue, but very soon we could play c3. And before we do, though, let's put El Hombre on d5. Whether he takes or plays f4, our king is dreaming about that big fat f5 square, d5 square. There it is, f4. And now you can see the king on g6 didn't help anybody's soul out, you know? Didn't help anybody. Now, one Question is, they're going to come on and they're going to say, oh, it was lost from the beginning. I had no chance of drawing. I don't know why you did this to me, cry. But I wonder if somebody could have given him a better run. So I'll tell you this. Do you play some strong GM, man, they'll mess you up on it. And we'll see this in the game, too. Because Smyslov does some evil things, too. In any case, they're going to whine at me. So I'm just preparing my own self mentally for their whine. It's going to be a deep and withering whine of cry. Why did you make me do it? I just wanted to have fun today, cry. I wanted to play a position that, I don't know, had some life in it or something. And why'd you do this to me? I'm just preparing myself. Preparing you perhaps too, but I'm just preparing myself for this whining. Bruce is already getting up. That's a celebratory move. You're not even looking at the board anymore. I'll take a walk around the tournament hall. I don't need this. I don't need this. Waiting for the handshake. Mr. Proust, though, buddy. Oh, I got the times all messed up, by the way. Let's fix that. Whoop. Look at that. Whoop. Coast didn't even use his time. Bruce is going downtown with the time, though. To me, knight f5 followed by king c4, d5 is the easy way. That's the so-called easy way. Just start rounding them up. There it comes. Now, if you wanted to be nervous about, there's no reason to be nervous. You could be nervous like, oh, maybe my knight's going to get out. But once El Hombre comes to d5, boss, you are guaranteed to always have knight d6. In addition, of course, to El Hombre going to snag the a7 pawn. It is not a pleasant life. In addition, we should add, to just some basic zugzwang options, with our c3 move that somebody in chat mentioned. You can always play c3 or c4 and start marching the pawn. It is over. Crispy critters. Yep. Crispy critters. It'll be interesting to see the extent of the whine that I get. I'm used to getting the whine, though, and I think it's part of being a chess educator is just getting comfortable with the whine, I've got when we started the training program, I was convinced I was going to get a lot of pushback for like the Polgar maiden twos. I was like, they're too hard, cry. It's not like real chess. Why are you doing this to me? And we've had some, but far less than expected, And I know it's good for people to do it. It's good for me when I did it. There it is. But anyways, I'm accustomed to the whine. I think it might be a sign of a good teacher if you get some whine. All right, my friends.
What are you talking about?
We're talking about what your reaction is going to be right now, the kinds of things you're going to say.
Oh, I see.
Okay. So, tell you what. Why don't I show you guys what happened in the game first? So this is Aronin-Smylov, I think Soviet Championship, like 1951. And
I think I've seen the game.
Okay.
Yeah, they're fun.
And I think White played Rook G8 and Black had like a miracle draw in the king and pawn ending.
Good. Correct. And, I have, like I was telling Chad, I have full sympathy for anybody playing Rook G8. It certainly looks winning. It certainly looks winning. Oh, my God. So let's check it out.
He did do it, yeah. Okay.
And now he plays. Now, so the issue is, in this position, now maybe this is still winning for White, but White makes the very legitimate attempt to play G4 now. Okay, and so check out what happens. Pop, and then cold shower. Boom.
Right, White wanted to play G4.
So, my chess friends, we'll just let you pause for a moment, put yourself in white shoes, and think about why is this a cold shower? Why is this a cold shower? I've had this happen to me, by the way. I guess everybody's had it.
Yeah. I remember. So basically, if you put your king on c4, black can play f5. And if you take on f5, black plays e4. And your king, because the c pawn's going to be on c5, covering d4.
Right.
So your king will be frozen on e4 and not be able to move back to stop this e pawn.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And we should also mention that taking doesn't really help either, because then black comes up and gains counterplay. Mm-hmm. Ooh. So I'll just share this. By the way, I just want to say, for those of you doing this sparring, I don't expect you necessarily to find this, and I'm pretty sure, I'm certain Smyslov found this in the adjournment analysis. I'm pretty sure the situation was, in fact, you're sealing a move and you decide between rook g8 and rook c6. And do chose rook g8, and of course, Smyslov's going to have some time, probably with some kind of team, to figure it out that this is a chance. So I don't expect anyone necessarily to find this move. It's more like you get a chance to play this position out with the better knight and the better rook to prove that you can win it against someone at your level, right? Whereas this is just a beautiful, let's say a beautiful thing at the end of all your tribulations to see how a genius plays this position. So this is definitely, I would call a study-like solution. Bam! It's already showing it. Now I can sit. Because you can't.
It's sick that he's just sitting.
He's just like, what do you want, buddy? C3, I'll play A5. Yeah. Pop, pop. And here they agreed to a draw. And we should just show if king C4, F5. If takes E4, and I believe white is toast.
Yeah.
It's really
Looks like
evil.
it.
It's truly evil. Yeah. And interestingly, actually, if it were black to move, then we might get a reverse. We would get a reversal of fortune, right?
Black would have.
Actually, black has king h7 still.
King h5 would win.
King h5 still. Yeah. So amazing business. And now we're going to go back to the game position.
Oh, could we check one thing instead of G4?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
So I was thinking, I was trying to figure this out before the game, but obviously the rook and knight position looked a lot more practical to play. But what's going on here? Because I thought white's just faster, and
okay, yeah.
I didn't exactly see how black was breaking through. Or
let's look. I'm sure that white was afraid of this move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's say here.
Take.
Well, or bring your king up. We don't have to rush. And now, can I get fancy?
Yeah, so black is just in time here.
In any case, you can imagine why the guy played g4, right? Because this looks a little bit like, maybe I've lost control. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't look quick enough.
Okay. So, by the way, I'm happy. You guys have proved me wrong. I thought you guys were going to be whining at me about, like, cry, it was such an easy position, yada, yada.
No, that's a good thing.
Okay, so let's go back to this position. And one thing, actually, I'll just say as a dogma, a useful dogma, that evaluating positions like this, I think the principle of two weaknesses, very helpful. And so here I would say the two weaknesses that we have here are we have a better knight and we have a better rook. And in particular, we can get another pawn. So when Kostya, both players played rook takes c6.
I didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, David played king e2, but we're going to win the pawn anyway. And then just on a conceptual basis, right, we say we're winning because we have two weaknesses, better knight and the pawn, right, and the pawn. Now, David played king e2. Somebody in chat mentioned king e2 too, so I regret a little bit not adding that to the... No, I don't regret it. The reason I didn't add it as a poll option was I wanted it just to be a simple choice between the pawn endgame and rook takes c6.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely tortured me a little bit, Jesse, that you put up this position. And I was like, I'd probably play king e2. And then you put up, like that's my instinct, right? And then you put up the pole and my move's not in the pole. So I had to prepare myself to be berated for playing a move outside the bounds.
But the thing
Yeah, I thought that was grounds for disqualification, but
but the thing is, I think rook d1 doesn't do it. Because actually it was the move, I think, what was it, Kostya played when this first thing, this rook isn't doing anything. And then I think one of you guys played rook c8 here. Great move.
Beautiful move.
Yeah, then just toast, crispy critters.
Now, odds are white has another winning move, but that one was really nice.
That one was a nice one, yeah. That was a nice move. Okay, so...
For example, I was afraid that even the rook endgame after knight g7 was dead. But...
Yeah, no need, but yes. No need, but yes, that's right.
Because he sort of takes my A pawn and my B pawn, and what am I doing? Going to g1 with my rook while he queens?
Yeah, and by the way, like this move, for example, that might also be winning, but rook c8 is so much nicer because you're just saying, Mr. Bad Bishop, I'm cutting you off completely.
Yeah.
You know, completely. Okay, so...
It was sweet, and I hadn't seen rook c8, so I learned something from that move at least today.
And there's a lot of endgame studies that have to do with domination like that. Okay, so let's go back and let's imagine this is the correct move. And bishop f8. Let's say king e2. And let's say king f7. And then I think this transposed to you guys' game, right?
yeah.
93. And then Kostya played rook d4 here. Felt a little bit like desperation because white wants to play f3 anyway.
Yeah.
But arguably, this is, if for the rook takes c6 line, this does feel to me like best play, something like that, right? Maybe maybe something like this, I was thinking.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought it was just pretty much busted.
95?
95, let's say.
Yeah. No, I'm not arguing too much about it. So let's just say the problem for me is that if I do nothing, this is going to happen to me.
Yeah.
And if I play king e6, I have to worry about that move.
And also, in addition, you know, I thought about bringing the king up and attacking the pawn a lot of times, but white already has an extra pawn, right? So ultimately, I decided it was most practical to leave all my pieces on the best possible squares and just play c4, c5 in a lot of cases, right? And that seems like a big threat for white right here.
Let's see, I'm going to flip this just to try to see what would be the best practical approach here. Okay, this is certainly ugly, but maybe bishop e7, knight d5, a5. It's really nasty, but yeah.
So then what's your intention on rook a6, etc.?
Well, I was gonna have to play bishop d8, right?
Okay. Yeah. Bishop d8.
And then here I have to consider whether I want to play f5 or bishop d8. I assume both are actually losing for me, but just in terms of trying my best or something, like maybe f5. Yeah. And then now maybe here, I don't know.
And is your intention for white to bring the king to b5?
I thought that was good. Yeah.
All I was trying to say is like this way maybe black can kind of keep the game going a little bit. I don't know.
Oh, sorry, Jesse. Let me mention something.
Yeah.
In this position after f5, I think rook c7,
Yeah.
like I played in the game, would be enough to sort of end the discussions.
Okay, I kind of don't know if you need to, but let's see.
Yeah, this was so annoying.
But okay, let's say I consider here.
I think we should just take on f5 if you give us this option.
I'll take that one.
And then blocks out the king.
And then you want to play c3 next.
The c3 if your bishop's on d4.
Well, that's
Otherwise,
reasonable.
king e4 and start running.
Okay. Let's see, so I c7. And if I make this sad move,
Then, we're pretty much in the game to play it, right?
but this
A5
time,
move in.
but this time I will get g4.
You will get g4.
Maybe not. We're gonna.
You
find
sound
out.
confident.
No, I maybe so maybe f3 right away.
Yeah.
Or maybe knight d5 to e3 here, like I played in the game.
Well, all I'm thinking is like here at least I'm a tempo up on the game, right?
Yeah, you are. I don't know that that's gonna.
I don't know either. I don't know either. I do want to exchange a pawn or something if I can.
And actually, in the game, Kosi was reluctant to play bishop c5. I wonder if he didn't want king c4 with tempo here.
Yeah, I mean,
That probably wins too.
pretty much never working.
Yeah, I think white can do this and transfer the king to d5 now if they want to.
Yeah, it's
Play
poor.
out like this.
That's poor. Yeah, there's always some practical chance as long as I got the bishop. So this one definitely winning, but white still has to work a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's more unequivocal to just bring the knight to e3 like I did and resolve the situation without letting the bishop do something just yet.
Yeah, forcing f4.
Yeah, because that king can still always get to c4 eventually. It's not like a key tempo.
Okay, cool. Well, let's cut it there. These Endgame Senseis can be a variable length. We will do this hopefully more on the regular. And what I'm going to try to do is go through the dojo training program positions for the positional endgame sparring. I think it's really important for people to get used to both how to think about positions and also to play the games themselves at a 5:30 time control, because that's what you're going to get at the endgame. And also just, especially at the 13 to 1400 level, to try to learn how to close out winning positions without blundering anything. It's actually, these guys might, usually They make it look hard, but today they made it look easy.
Yay. Yay.
All right, everybody, we'll be
Wait,
back.
Jesse.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jesse, I think there's maybe one really useful question we could address for a moment.
Okay.
If this video is at some point going to help people who've, let's say, struggled with this position, which is, when you look at the starting position, there's a question of whether or not you want to trade any of these pieces for any of black's pieces, right? Mm-hmm. And on the one hand, all the white pieces are better than the black pieces. So that's kind of like a reason to maybe reject rook g8. Is like, what are we trying to do? Trade two good pieces for one bad piece and one so-so piece. But then on the other hand, there's the factor that at some point, if your advantage is big enough, you are simplifying your life if you trade off the opponent's pieces, even if your pieces are better than theirs, right? Like in the variation that I played as white, at some point, I played rook c7 to trade rooks. You could argue that my rook was a tiny bit better than black's rook, but it was sort of a major simplification.
Right.
Do you have any tips or thoughts for people around that question of how to figure out when you want to simplify and when you want to just sit on the advantage that your better pieces give you?
Well, let's just say if you can go to a winning pawn endgame, you should do it. Right? And what David is saying is, in general, if you've got the better pieces, keep the better pieces. The pawn endgame, that's a special one because a lot of times you can calculate it out. Mr. Proust, in fact, is of the belief that he could calculate out any pawn endgame. We showed that on a previous Endgame Sensei not to be true. However, however, I appreciate the sentiment. But in any case,
there's some dispute on that, because on Endgame Sensei, you've got to make your first move in under a minute. And my claim is, given infinite time, that I
In any case, one of the things that's obvious is that this guy, Aronin, was a great player back in the day, and he missed this amazing resource, G4. Very easy to miss something like this. And I think for most players, if you, let's say our players in our program, and we get people playing rook g8, unless they've seen this video or the game, I think that white will still win. That's one of the interesting things about our sparring, right? White will still win after rook g8 against someone of their level, unless they've seen the video, I think, because G4 is something very special.
Yeah, well, to David's point, I would say, I feel like simplification is good when it makes things clear, but if the resulting position or resulting pawn in game, if it's not clear, then yeah, I feel like you should weigh on the side of keeping more pieces on.
Right.
So you'll probably have a chance to exchange later.
Right, and analyzing those pawn in games is a whole art form as we've seen it. I think I could well imagine myself playing g8. I could well imagine it because it really does look winning at first.